So I usually don't do videos like this, but today's a little different. So I wanted to give you my thoughts on these final college football playoff rankings, or just the rankings in general, and let you know what I think about them at least a little bit. You can get some more if you want me to talk some more on it, just let me know. But the first thing I'm going to say is that LSU should absolutely be number one. And the reason why I say that is that I've, over the last, week or so, or maybe even a little bit longer, I felt like this team looks like they're on their way to winning a national championship. Sometimes I get a feeling about certain outcomes in sports, and a lot of times it's right. And something about Joe Burrow's confidence and the way that they are addressing each game and the way they're just confidently going about handling their business every week just inspires some type of confidence in them. And the other team that was number one basically all season, which I didn't have a problem with, and I still wouldn't have had a problem with being number one right now, Ohio State, while they might be very balanced, I don't see their offense scaling up to the large point totals that they were putting up against some of those Big Ten teams. Those same totals, I don't see that happening in the playoffs a lot. And their matchup in this first round of the playoffs is going to be against Clemson, who hasn't gotten a lot of respect this year because of their scheduling. Respect, they're still Clemson. People still know they have a talented team, but people have kind of looked at them kind of as almost second-class citizens in this top three range because of their schedule in the ACC. So here's the thing about a team like Clemson. I gain a lot of respect for Clemson, and I give them grace when it comes to things like scheduling, and that can be a whole other video. Let me know if you want to talk about that, because when you have teams like Alabama, Clemson, and Ohio State, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you now, there will not be teams on the level of Alabama, Clemson, and Ohio State. Alabama cannot play Alabama 12 games in a season. Clemson cannot play Clemson 12 games in a season. Ohio State cannot play Ohio State 12 games in a season. There are teams that Alabama, Clemson, and Ohio State are just significantly better than, and there's nothing the rest of college football can do to change that. 99% of the teams they play are at a severe disadvantage, and that's not Alabama, Clemson, or Ohio State's fault. So Clemson ACC, while their schedule may not be enough to challenge them all the time, that also should be expected, and they shouldn't be penalized as heavily for that. That's just my opinion on it. You can let me know what you think, but I believe that's the case. So with that said, Clemson's going to play Ohio State, and I believe Clemson can actually beat them, and they actually might beat them a little bit more decisively than you think they would. Now, that's not me saying that definitively at this point. That's just me kind of making some observations and giving you some of what my thinking process is like at this point. But maybe you'll see what I'm talking about when that game actually happens. So I'm going to go ahead and say this. The national championship game will be Clemson versus LSU. I'm saying it right now. I'm leaning, actually. I'm going to go ahead. I usually don't do this type of thing. I'm actually leaning with LSU being the champion this year. I'm actually leaning LSU being the national champion, especially considering that LSU beat Alabama. I'm not the type of person that says if a team beats my team, they must go on to lose. If a team beats my team, that tells me that you play well for the most part, or in most cases. And now I want you to keep winning because I don't want you to waste a loss against Alabama. Like, you beat the team. Now go prove why you beat us. Don't go lose and embarrass us. So that's a whole other deal. So I say this final poll is interesting, yet consistent-ish. And there's a reason why I say that. Every team, just about, with the exception of Penn State and Florida, played in or won a conference championship game that's ahead of Auburn in the poll. So every team ahead of number 12 is played in or won a conference championship game, with the exception of Penn State and Florida. I don't know why they stuck around there. They're not bad teams. I'm not saying that at all. But when you consider how they rank the rest of them in the top 12, it's weird that they would be ahead of the Utah, which also played in a conference championship game. So they seem to have given weight to the conference championship games this week, which is interesting because a lot of people feel like they don't, or that it's not, but there's clear evidence against that, like right here in this last poll of the week here. And I mean to clarify, a Power 5 conference championship game, because there were other conference championship games like Memphis and Boise State. They're not ranked in the top 12. But I'm just saying that. Now, here's the most interesting thing to me, is that Georgia only dropped one spot. And it's weird that they dropped one spot when they were blown out. And this is not me demeaning Georgia. I'm not the type of person that says, "Oh, this team lost, that means they're horrible." First of all, I hate when people do that. Please stop doing that. If a team loses, doesn't mean they're horrible because they lost. That doesn't make sense. They just lost. But in this particular case, Georgia lost by 27 points to LSU. Usually a blowout means you drop pretty significantly. Georgia dropped one spot. And that's weird. There's a reason why I say that. The team that Georgia lost to was LSU. Alabama's ranked number 13 behind 9-3 Auburn, which is okay if you want to say, well, they shouldn't be ranked ahead of the team that beat them, although there's been cases where that's not been the case this year in the rankings. That's fine. Alabama's ranked number 13. But Georgia lost to the same team Alabama lost to, but they lost to the same team Alabama lost to by 22 more points than Alabama did in a more significant game. In the conference championship game, well, I hate making games more significant other, but like quote unquote significant according to what most people's metrics are. They lost to LSU in a more significant game, in the SEC championship game, by way more than Alabama did. Not to mention that their other loss in the season came against an unranked opponent, which Alabama hasn't lost to an unranked opponent in a very, very long time. Alabama usually wins the games it's supposed to win. And the teams that Alabama lost to this year, losses came by a total of 9 points. So I'm not even arguing that Alabama should be ahead of Georgia or that Alabama should be in Georgia's spot. But if you're going to drop Alabama to 13, you should definitely drop Georgia lower, or at least bring Alabama higher than where they are. That part of the ranking thing is really inconsistent. And so here's the thing. I don't really care about like the rankings in the end. Like unless you're in the playoffs at this point, it doesn't matter unless you're really that worried about which bowl game you go to, which I have some points about that I'm going to make too. But it's weird to see kind of like inconsistencies on that point, which the rankings thing in general is subjective, which is fine. You have me on record saying that I'm fine with subjectivity because that's just how these things will go. There will be no machine making an objective, playoff ranking. I made a whole video about how everyone's criteria for the playoff rankings is wrong because you expect everybody to agree with your subjective ranking when that just won't be the case. But I just found the ranking seedings, in my personal thought, to be really interesting because if you flip Alabama and Georgia's situation, I wonder if people would be fine with Alabama being at number 5 after they just lost by 27 points to LSU and Georgia being at 13. My gut feeling says no, people would be mad about Alabama being at number 5 if that happened to them. So I'm just saying. Also, I got to say this. I really love bowl games. I still love bowl games. A lot of people think bowl games are irrelevant now because of playoffs. I'm one of those people that's here to say that I like bowl games. And it's fun to see matchups like Alabama versus Michigan. It's fun to see the Sugar Bowl, the Rose Bowl, like the matchups went back when they were regular matches. But now, bowls like the Citrus Bowl and all the New Year's Six, and those matchups between the conferences are still pretty cool. And I wouldn't want to lose that. I wouldn't want people to lose the significance of that. So, I don't know. I feel like I just had to say that because I feel like I have people who have negative feelings toward bowl games. And the last thing I'm going to say, in light of all these rankings, that the playoffs do not need to be expanded. 4 teams is good enough. 4 teams most likely will always be good enough. And 4 teams every year has been good enough. This year, there's very clear separation between the top 3 and the rest of college football. Maybe some little subjectivity with like certain teams like Alabama, whatever, should be like higher or could possibly put up a better match than who another number 4, number 5 is at this time. But for the most part, Clemson, Ohio State, and LSU have separated themselves as the 3 elite teams in college football, and everybody else they're not coming near that point. They might be very good, they might be great even, but not elite. And so why would you intentionally put a bunch of teams who don't stand a chance of winning the national championship against these guys? Okay, so I'm not going to say don't stand a chance at all because I'm not the type of person that believes in that thing. It's, I'll say probably statistically they won't put up a good fight. It's unlikely that they will win in a tournament. It'll come down to the same 3 teams in a national championship, getting toward those later rounds. there's no point of expanding it out if we know who the elite teams are in the final rankings. No point to put in a fifth. Imagine this playoff with Georgia and Oregon in it. We just saw what LSU did to Georgia. If you believe Clemson and Ohio State are just as good as LSU, what makes you think that the outcome or that the national championship is going to have any other teams besides LSU, Georgia? I mean, not Georgia. LSU, Clemson, or Ohio State. I just don't see a good argument there, unless you're just saying, I just want to see the games for fun. Okay, if you say that, okay, cool. I'm not going to argue against that too much. You just want to see the game for fun. But to actually believe that those teams are good enough or that we should expand because you believe there's actually 6 elite teams in football, you have a hard time convincing me of that. I don't think it's the case. Even OU this year, Oklahoma being in at number 4. Oklahoma can't match up with this LSU team in a way that's going to significantly threaten them. And so this year, the number 1 seed, I believe, got the benefits of actually being a number 1 seed because they got the weaker matchup. Oklahoma doesn't hold a candle to a Clemson. And so being able to play against Oklahoma instead of Clemson in the first round is a significant advantage for LSU. So we'll see how this all plays out. Those are the last thoughts I'm leaving this. I didn't think I would talk this much, but we'll see what happens. Thank you for watching, listening to me ramble and rant on about different things. Like I said, I usually don't do this format, but see you next time.